In the picture-perfect world of Valerie McDaniel, a successful vet, a loving mother, and a woman who had it all, darkness lurked just beneath the surface. Her life seemed like a fairy tale. But behind the smiles, betrayal shattered her marriage, and secrets from her past started to surface. And all these somehow drove her to take her own life. But originally, there were two other persons who were supposed to die in the process. Valerie McDaniel was a big deal in Houston. She was a vet, very smart, and everyone who knew her liked her very much. She was the valedictorian of high school, so she had it together from the beginning. She was also very kind and caring and went on to inspire a lot of people in her field. She says it was a life of romance and love. She was in vet school at Texas A&M where she met Marion McDaniel, aka Mac. Everything blossomed quickly, so they married and lived in a house that her parents were able to help them with. She had a vet clinic which she owned while Mac was the office administrator. She married Mac and they lived a high life. They had fancy cars and a big house. Still, not all was easy. They could not have any children, but they eventually adopted a little girl in 2008. When Valerie was younger and newly married, she began experiencing what a falling family did to a marriage. Everything seemed perfect on the outside, but things weren't as great as they seemed. And finally, then came one day when Valerie found a note at work that pretty much shattered everything. This was about Mac cheating on her. That news hit her so hard that it led to their divorce, which was obviously a tough time for her. In December 2014, Valerie filed for it. By August 2016, it was all done, and she moved into a new place with her daughter, trying to start over. Around that time, Valerie met Leon, who was the son of her neighbor. Leon was 8 years younger than her, and he quickly became a big part of her life. He was also a doctor specializing in emergency and transplant surgeries. Leon was charismatic and energetic, and they hit it off right away. Their relationship grew fast, especially with everything Valerie had been dealing with in her personal life. By the time the divorce became final, Leon was living with her and they were all over each other. It was as if the drama of the marriage was just a thing of the past, but that's when the real chaos started. Although Valerie had finally moved on to a new stage of life, traces of her past life with Mac continued to surround her. Her colleagues at the clinic noticed that something was wrong, and most of her emotional turmoil could be associated with the never-ending drama involving her ex-husband. This tension added some complications to the seemingly good relationship she had with Leon. Leon Jacobs' past was also far from perfect. He had been through a series of messed-up relationships and had some serious legal and personal problems. He was married for 12 years, presenting a picture-perfect life with his 2 sons. But things weren't as great as they seemed. Eventually, his wife also filed for divorce, accusing him of mental cruelty. Things went dark when Leon got arrested for stalking her a year later, unable to let go of the marriage. He even pleaded guilty to attempted cyber harassment for bombarding his kids with messages after the divorce. When asked if he felt sorry, Leon didn't hold back. He claimed he was just trying to keep a relationship with his children, but his actions were anything but healthy. Besides the personal crisis, Leon's career did not turn out to be what he had dreamed of as a child. He wanted to be a doctor, but everything would go wrong each time he tried. He was kicked out of every residency program he entered because he was a threat to patients, and no hospital wanted him. Professional failures added to his growing frustration. When he moved to Pittsburgh, he met Megan Veris, a 33-year-old hotel assistant manager. They hit it off, and soon they were living together in Houston. Despite their fancy lifestyle, their relationship was full of drama. After 3 years, things blew up again, and Megan ended up kicking Leon out. She later accused him of assault, claiming he hit her and covered her mouth. Leon denied everything, and however, his anger grew when she refused to return to him. However, it worsened when prosecutors began thinking Leon might have gone that extreme to protect himself. They believe he came up with a plan to silence Megan once and for all. He thought if she disappeared, his legal problems would disappear too, and he could pick up from where he left off his career. That's when he supposedly first tried to hire a hitman to take her out. But here's where it gets even crazier. The guy Leon thought was his hitman was actually Mortaz Azeh, aka Taz, who was a former U.S. Army soldier. Taz, using the name Zach, pretended to be the guy for the job. When he figured out Leon's intentions, he learned the terrifying details of what Leon wanted. he suggested using potassium to induce a fatal heart attack. Taz, who took $9,000 from Leon for the job, clearly made it obvious he didn't care one way or another that he spent it. Indeed, he seemed rather satisfied with himself, saying he was content spending Leon's money. But here's the kicker. Though Taz took the money, he had absolutely no intention of even carrying through the hit. Rather, when Taz discovered how Leon had actually used what he was searching for, he quickly ran away and hid very well. Meanwhile, Leon, not realizing how badly Taz had planned things, continued searching, still holding on to a problem and looking for answers. That's when he contacted Michael Kubach, a big-time bail bondsman in Houston with a larger-than-life reputation. Kubach remembers Leon storming into his office all fired up, demanding to know how to get in touch with this guy named Zach. Leon told him he'd paid a bunch of money to Zach to take care of something, to get a woman out of the picture so she couldn't testify against him. Kubach immediately got a bad vibe, sensing that Leon wasn't just dealing with a small issue, but something far darker. He wasted no time and called the chief of police, knowing something shady was going on. As the detectives began to search for this phantom Zach, they quickly determined he was really Taz, who, as they discovered, Kubach had dealt with before. Taz was released from jail while waiting for his trial on a minor theft charge because he took money from his roommate. It wasn't long before the Houston police found him. But here's the twist. Taz wasn't just some random guy. He was actually an undercover police officer working with the Houston Police Department, Detective Javier. Quite a cinematic twist. Now you might wonder, what's he doing here in the first place? Basically, Taz, having a concern for the woman Megan's safety, agreed to help catch Leon in the act with a sting operation. When he got to know that Leon was looking to hire a hitman, he let Leon know he knew someone perfect for the job. He set up a meeting for the next day with Detective Javier as the new hitman. But Leon dropped a bombshell in that meeting. He didn't just want Megan taken care of, he also wanted to deal with Valerie's ex-husband, Mac. And the next day, Leon and Valerie met Taz and Detective Javier at Olive Garden to hash out details. And of course, everything was recorded. In the course of the discussion, Leon laid out his plan to eliminate Megan. He recommended running her off the road and threatening her. Then the conversation turned to Valerie's ex-husband, Mac. Valerie had a notion that Mac would be killed in a robbery gone wrong, a carjacking that would look like an accident. Detective Javier, playing along, assured him that he would handle everything exactly as they wanted. But on March 9, 2017, Detective Javier called Leon with some shocking news. Mac was dead. However, instead of just telling him over the phone, he insisted on coming to their house in person to deliver the news. When he arrived, he said Mac had been shot in the head and even showed them a photo of the body. But here's the twist. Valerie didn't react the way anyone would expect. No crying, no sadness. She was simply calm, almost detached, like she was hearing about someone else's problem. What nobody knew was that Mac wasn't actually dead. Javier had faked his death as part of some big undercover plan. Mac's death was all part of a plan to make Leon think Megan was dead. Well into that night, some photos of Megan were found with a note that had the words, "She's out of control and has to be taken care of. She's dead." So you see, Leon was that type of guy who could do anything to survive. If it meant hurting someone, so be it. He did not care if something was right or wrong. He only cared about looking out for number one. That day, after getting the news of death, Valerie and Leon had spent the day watching movies with their daughter and hadn't gone anywhere. But after some awkward back and forth, the cops finally dropped the bombshell. They were arresting both her and Leon for solicitation. They had no idea that the people they were trying to kill were still alive. Leon was completely thrown off by the arrest. He even asked for a sweatshirt, complaining that he was cold. On the other hand, Valerie fretted over her daughter who, sleeping through the entire escapade, was in bed. After the arrests, the news broke. Valerie and Leon were facing charges for trying to have their exes killed. A mutual friend who saw Valerie's footage during her arraignment couldn't believe it. They remembered thinking, "That's not the Valerie I know." The whole thing, plus the media coverage, showed a side of Valerie that no one had ever seen before. Meanwhile, Leon is in a tight spot as he has charges related to Megan and cannot post bail. Valerie, on the other hand, is granted bail and gets out of custody. She goes home to await the situation with her family. During this period, Brittany, Valerie's good friend, is always by her side, sending messages to check in, give support, and tell Valerie how much she loves her. But Valerie's veterinary license has been put on hold, and Brittany starts noticing how much this is hitting Valerie emotionally. Valerie seems to be going down the scale in her mood, and Brittany can feel it when they hug each other goodbye at Valerie's condo. It's like the life is sucked out of her, and it's painful to see. Then, 2 weeks following the charge of soliciting capital murder, Valerie published a heartbreaking video on March 25, 2017. She's a mess, clearly suffering, filled with remorse and sorrow. In the video, she insists that she never tried to kill her ex-husband. She talks about the weight of her sadness and how she just wants to reconnect with her daughter and Leon, but she feels like she's stuck in a loop of loss. And to everyone's shock, just 2 days later, Valerie, who once seemed strong and determined, takes her own life, jumping 7 stories from her condo. Brittany is shattered when she reflects on how Valerie was already in a fragile state and how Leon manipulated her to make tragic decisions. Meanwhile, Leon keeps on asserting that he is innocent, as he denies any involvement with the plot to harm Megan or anyone else. Exactly a year after Valerie died in March 2018, Leon finally went to trial for 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder. The prosecution claims that Leon had enough motivation, and those motivations were to eliminate 2 obstacles that were present in his life. Those 2 obstacles are Mac, who could force Valerie to choose between her daughter and him, and Megan, who could easily send him to prison due to his previous crimes. Cameron Callaghan, a prosecutor, says these are the reasons behind Leon's alleged plot to have people killed. However, a lawyer, George Parnham, flips the script to this scene. The person doing all of the real maneuvering in this affair was Valerie. He says Valerie was in control of this whole event and funded it and dialed the telephone calls resulting in these charges. That afternoon, the first to take the stand is Megan, Leon's ex-girlfriend and one of his victims. She lets the court know of the harrowing stalking and harassment that Leon undertook on her. For instance, she says Leon would pop up unannounced at her house without being invited. He stalked her, making her feel uncomfortable. At a point, he even was hiding behind her workplace, later on tracing her to their new residence. There's one particular day when he blocked her car and screamed at her, demanding a word with her. The trial ends with some pretty heavy emotional moments, especially from Megan, Mac, and Leon himself. Leon testifies and argues that this is not a trial of character, but a trial about the charges against him for soliciting capital murder. He pleads the jury to not judge him based on his past or personal life. On the other hand, Megan, after running off to Pittsburgh, is brought back to Houston for a sting operation. They set up a fake kidnapping scene in a warehouse, tying her hands and feet and taping her mouth shut to make it look real. Megan's clearly shaken and shares how traumatic the experience was, adding more weight to the case against Leon. And then Mac McDaniel, Valerie's ex-husband, testifies. He talks about their 17-year marriage before they split in 2016. He recalls finding out that Valerie was living with Leon and wasn't too happy about it, mainly because of Leon's criminal history. When asked if he ever told Valerie he didn't want Leon around their daughter while she had custody, Mac says he did. Valerie also agreed to that, but later he found out she wasn't sticking to that plan. Mac also reveals that he was informed that he was the target of a murder plot. The prosecution proves it by presenting a staged photo of Mac. He pretends to be dead, and for the setup, pig's blood is poured on him. On day 3 of the trial, Leon himself comes to the stand as the defense's star witness. He denies ever asking anyone to kill or harm someone, claiming he never used such words in any of the recorded conversations. He says he might have excluded people from certain plans but never asked for any violence. The prosecution, however, presents recordings where Leon talks about someone being dead and saying he didn't want to know any details. One recording stands out where Leon allegedly says, "Inject her with potassium chloride. Stop her heart. Untraceable." Leon denies telling anyone to actually do that, but admits he said it was an option someone could consider. He also recalls talking to an undercover officer. "If those options don't work, I don't give a, then you gotta do what you gotta do because my survival is more important," which the prosecution uses to show how far Leon was willing to go to protect himself. That's not all. Leon was caught on tape offering $10,000 to have Mac killed in a staged carjacking. When eventually he was told that Mac would be shot and left in the street for dead, he agreed to pay $2,500. But when asked whether he had promised to make the payment, he merely shrugged and said, "If that's what you say." He tried to backpedal, saying it wasn't really his idea, that the undercover cop and a guy named Javier were pushing him to go along with it. However, obviously the prosecution used these tapes against him as proof of his involvement. During the trial, Leon kept insisting that he was just reacting to pressure from the undercover officers. He claimed they kept pushing him to go along with the violent plan, even though he never actually wanted anyone hurt. He also kept saying he had no intention of causing harm and was just caught up in the moment, trying to avoid conflict. But the prosecution landed a big one. When he believed Megan was tied up and in danger, he didn't do anything to stop the plan. He admitted to that when asked, saying he didn't speak up to stop it. After deliberating for just over an hour, the jury finally found him guilty of trying to hire someone to kill both Megan and Mac. This then comes the sentencing phase, where Annie Morrison, Leon's ex-wife, comes to testify. There she shared some more disturbing information on how their marriage was so rough that Leon had maltreated her even when she was pregnant. According to her, she and her family were constantly in danger of being murdered should she ever attempt to leave him. She therefore escaped to Chicago, but from there he constantly threatened her. After another short deliberation, the jury delivered a life imprisonment sentence to Leon for the 2 counts of solicitation of capital murder. In victim impact statements, Megan addressed Leon. She told him that he'd never see his kids again, that he had ruined her emotionally and financially, but that she was done letting him affect her life. Currently, Leon is eligible for parole in 2047, when he'll be 69. So what do you think of this complex crime? Do you think both Valerie and Leon guilty of this? Don't you think Mac also had his fair share of guilt which remained undiscussed, as he used to exploit Valerie for money? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you want another complicated true crime story like this, just watch this video to know how far people can go to cover up their heinous job. Subscribe to the channel for more. See you soon.